So I know a number of years back, I don't remember exactly when, early around 2000, something like that, there was a competition established in the name of Emanuel Feuermann. Did your family have much to do with the establishment of that? And what can you tell me?
There's every 4 years. I think the first year was either 2001 or 2002. I don't remember exactly. Maybe it was '01. The Kronberg Academy near Frankfurt, led by this man named Raimund Schrenkler, established a cello competition called the Feuermann Grand Prix. It happens every 4 years. And as a family, we are not so involved in it, except that before they started it, they had to ask us permission for the use of the name. And a very nice man named Wolfgang came and visited my grandmother and I where we were with our family in Europe. And I think we were maybe a little bit too trusting without doing much research, and we said, yes, by all means, it's very exciting. It was also around the time that the book of Annette Moreau was being published, and it was around the same time of his 100th birthday. So there was
his 100th birthday would have been 2002. He was born in 1902.
Right.
Yes.
So maybe it was '02.
Yes.
But in any case, it was around all the fervor and a lot of activity was happening in Europe and in the States around that time. And it was exciting to us, my grandmother and I. So we agreed that they could use the name. And so there is the Feuermann Grand Prix every 4 years in Berlin.
And have you attended?
I have attended. I went to the first one with my grandmother. It was a big to-do. Sophie Feuermann, Feuermann's sister and former accompanist, she was also there, and she was in Germany for the first time since she left before the war. She had never spoken a word of German since she left. She refused to ever step foot on that land again or speak the language.
People in my family felt the same. They don't want to go back.
Yeah. My grandmother was on the first thing smoking with that she could go back. She couldn't wait to get back to Germany. Sophie refused to go back until that moment. She was there. I want to be honest about my feelings about this organization, and I also want to be diplomatic at the same time, which is a conflict because I feel I have been grossly mistreated by Raimund Schrenkler, the director of the Feuermann Grand Prix. He was rude and dismissive and I think racist towards me from the minute I met him. He treated me so horribly that first trip for the Grand Prix that my grandmother was aware. She was already in her late 80s and was concerned that she wouldn't still be alive for the next one in 4 years. And she was right. She had passed away before the next one. The way Raimund Schrenkler treated me was so terrible that my grandmother hired a lawyer to come to her hotel room before we left the Adlon that year to write an official letter stating that as the widow of Feuermann, she demanded that he always have me be an honored guest. And it wasn't so much that she wanted me to be honored in any way as a cellist or as a human being in this festival, but just she saw the mistreatment he had towards me, and so much so that she went out of her way to write this letter to make sure it was written in history. We could point to it, that she was concerned about this and wanted him to know. And in fact, I could point to a lot of examples of his nastiness towards me, and there was really no reason for it. I was well behaved, and I didn't do anything to garner that kind of...
You're a likable person. Maybe he wasn't expecting a black woman.
I know he was not expecting a black woman, and he's married actually to, I believe, a Korean woman. I mean, he's got children that are not fully white, but nonetheless, black represents something very different around the world. And for people who are not accustomed to black people, there is often a racism that they're not even aware of. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it or even give him the benefit of the doubt, because that's the one time in my life I can say explicitly I experienced a horrible racism. And I will give you an example. After a full week of being in Berlin for this Grand Prix, and my grandmother was the preeminent guest, of course, as the widow, as was Sophie, as the sister. My grandmother and I were very close. I mean, I spent my whole life with my grandmother. And she was also at that point in her late 80s, and she was a rather gentle woman and liked to feel secure, so she always wanted me by her side, which of course I was. My mother had already passed away, so it was me. And we were always together all week. And if she needed a rest, I'd put her down, I'd go do my own thing, then I'd come back and get her, etc. Every concert, I sat with her. If she had to get up on stage and speak, which was horrifying to her, I would walk with her onto the, that's what she wanted. The night of the last event of the week, I'm not sure if they had announced the winners already, but it was a big to-do and in a hall in the Jewish Museum in Berlin. And we arrived early so that the family could sit, and there were seats at the front of this hall, and it said for the Feuermann family, which meant my grandmother, Eva, my tante Sophie, Feuermann's sister, me, Sophie's daughter. So we all sat down, and the hall was filling up with people. It was minister of the something or other was there. It was a big,
I can just
blah,
imagine,
blah, blah.
yeah.
And, I've grown up in this environment. I've grown up Feuermann's granddaughter, so this isn't new to me. But this kind of treatment was brand new to me. And we sat down, and Raymond Trankler came over to me, and I was sitting next to my grandmother. You can't sit there. And I was like, but what? We're going through you're going to do something else now? And this is for the family. I was like, I am the family. I'm the granddaughter, and you know that. I've been here all week. No, you can't sit here. No. And I looked, my grandmother was tired. It was a long week. It was a lot of pushing and pulling at her as the widow. And I was like, you know what? I'm not having this fight today. I'm not doing this. I was like, I can't, I'm fine. And I was like, Oma, I'm not allowed to sit here. This was before she wrote the letter. I was like, I'm not allowed to sit here. I'm gonna get up. I've been asked to, he's like, go to the back. And
Back of the bus.
yeah. Exactly.
Wow.
And Oma, my grandmother, I called her Oma, she was like, no, Kika, you have to stay. I was like, Oma, I will, if you need me, just turn around. I will come right here. But it actually, strangely, it's very emotional. And I stood up, and I couldn't take it anymore. And I got up, and I walked towards the back of the hall. And my cousins were sitting there, and they're like, Kika, where are you going? I was like, this man, this horrible man, has told me I'm not allowed to sit I'm not at the family, and I can't sit in the front. And I just didn't want to fight anymore. And my father was an American black man, and I was calling him nightly, explaining to him what was happening there, and he just would calm me down and just, no one can ever take your legacy away from you. Nobody ever can take who you are from you. Don't worry about that. These people are horrible. Take care of Oma and move on. We'll deal with this when you come home. We'll do whatever. We'll write letters, this and the other. So I was walking to the back. My cousins were like, where are you going? I said, I'm not allowed to sit in the front. And I was just through. And I waited to walk back until the lights were still on, but it was getting quiet. And I made sure people saw me walk back. And I just stood in the back of the hall. And then Wolfgang, this man, who I have not seen since then, who was the one who had come to ask my grandmother and I.
He was the nice guy.
The nice guy. What are you doing back here, Marika? And I said, Trankler said I'm not allowed to sit in the front. They don't want me to be seen. He was furious. And he grabbed me and took me to the front, but on the side where he was sitting, and made room for me somehow. I remember I was like kind of shaking, like I was just...
I can't even imagine.
And I was young, and it was too much. Like I just didn't know anymore. I had bouts with Trankler already that week. So it was kind of astonishing to me that he could take it even further. So there I was sitting with Wolfgang in the front, and Raymond Trankler got on stage to make the initial remarks for the evening and speak to everybody, and he was so grateful to the Feuermann family for being there. Thank you so much, Eva. Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you so much, Susan, Sophie's daughter. It was like I didn't exist.
Jesus.
I had performed the first night.
Wow.
And Wolfgang wrote on a piece of paper, Marika, and he held it up. I'll never forget this. He was like, Marika, and he was pointing to me. Enkelin would not acknowledge me. For whatever reason, Herr Trankler doesn't like me to be the face of the family, but I am the family, and he can't do anything to keep me away. I didn't go the last one that happened because I'd just come off of a long tour, and I had work in New York, and I just didn't want to face. I just wasn't in the mood, frankly. I'm sure he was relieved I wasn't there. I shouldn't say that. I don't know what he was, if he even noticed. but I will be at the next one.
Sounds like he would have noticed, yes.
Yeah,
And
and so I'm going with an army of people
I mean, it's
next time.
so disheartening to hear that, and I hope it's one man and not thank God there was a Wolfgang. You have to.
I haven't seen him since that first time. Raymond
But at least
Trankler.
there was somebody in the organization willing.
Yes.
That understood
Mm-hmm.
the obscenity of this. This is
Yeah.
unconscionable.
It began, his nastiness towards me began from the minute he met me. And I remember I turned to Wolfgang when he brought me to that first rehearsal, that first time when I had to play with all these fancy cellists. He was so rude to me, and I looked at Wolfgang. I said, "Did you not tell him that Feuermann's granddaughter is black?" And this was before social media, before any way of really knowing these kinds of things, before you meet somebody. He was like, "Oh, but this doesn't matter, Marika." I was like, "I think it does." You know? So I don't know what I'm going to go to the next one, even if I will cancel my concert life to be there. I'm going to bring friends, black friends, and we're going to go as an army of black people representing the Feuermann family.
Oh my God.
And my European family will be there, as they always are. And when they saw, my Swiss cousins and my German cousins and my English cousins saw the way he mistreated me, they stood by my side every time we were there and made sure I was never there by myself and really defended me and were really disheartened and shocked by his behavior and his dismissal of me entirely. So obviously I didn't know Feuermann. My mother barely knew her father, but from everything I've heard and for the beautiful woman that my grandmother Eva was, there's no way Emanuel Feuermann would have not only tolerated this, but he would have never kept quiet to see someone using his name to treat his own people so terribly. So shame on Raymond Trankler, and I've kept quiet about this until this moment.
Wow.
I've been asked other times to talk about it, and I've had to sort of, I think I'm at an age now, and I have a sense of my own self in a way, and I don't mean racially, I just mean as a human being in the world, that I'm prepared to stand up to this man publicly and tell the classical music world and the world at large that the Feuermann competition is run by a really nasty racist man, Raymond Trankler. It's a shame, and I'm very glad that you've given me this, not only the opportunity to talk about this one ugly stain, but all of these things related to Feuermann, because so many people love his playing and are just curious about him, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to share it.
I think you're an incredible woman, and you just enrich his legacy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, it seems like we would have gotten on quite well, so.